Well, happy Future Fridays, Evan. I'm so excited to have you here. We've known each other for a while in this industry, especially some good skiing time. And I'm just such a fan of what you're doing with Disco. The concept of identity in crypto is becoming more and more important. And you really have been on the front edge of really defining that. You also have been so involved in things like Boys Club and Consensus, early Consensus, and a mentor in Web3, and just, really, really fascinating background. I can't wait to dive in. And so the way we usually start is just quickly what you're focused on these days and where you're calling in from.
GM, thank you so much for having me. Really excited to delve into all of these awesome details. And yeah, wow, it is wild that we have been working together on this stuff for so long at this point, but it makes for a really exciting conversation based on where we are now. So today I am calling in from the Metaverse, but also Lisbon, Portugal, where I'm doing some awesome work with some of our teammates and partners here. And I am here representing Disco, your identity for the Metaverse. And at Disco, we believe you are the multifaceted center of the party, just as you are, like a disco ball, and you should reflect your data and your identity to the world however you decide. And so that's why we've built a platform that makes it really easy for you to carry around data written about you using the same keys on chain. And our developer tools make it easy for applications, services, smart contracts, and more to be able to personalize experiences for you based on more than just your financial assets.
Oh, I love it. And like, so well said. Narrative is clearly your strong suit. Like, you have just such a deep history in storytelling. I know you were at Wandros, head of story department. You were director of product marketing at Berkshire Hathaway. So like, you have this real rooted history and more like the traditional sense of narrative. How did you get into this world in the first place? Like, how did you go from that to say, actually, I'm going to start at Consensus and do like head of entertainment there, which is so wild.
So actually, I started out in crypto before any of that. And my journey into storytelling was really a departure from my origin in technology. So a little over 10 years ago, I got really excited about Bitcoin, the ability to generate identities without having to ask for permission, the ability to transact between those identities to share data that represented financial assets. And so it was through sort of the understanding the power of distributed computing and the different ways that we can move data between individuals, between organizations, that put me on to the world that would become Web3. But actually, sort of after I got really excited about Bitcoin in an academic context, I had this amazing professor who introduced me to this topic, to sort of the world of startups and what could be built when we thought about technical architecture differently. And it was actually this same amazing professor who introduced me to Jesse Dillon, Bob Dylan's son, who leads the Wondrous team. And so my very first job there out in Hollywood taught me the importance of communicating messages of all different shapes and sizes, highly technical to extremely social, music videos to launching IBM Watson, and a few core pieces of information, guidance that I carry with me to this day are that, when you're sharing information about a new idea or a product, you never start at step one of the user journey you think. You invite people to join in the middle of their own story. And so when you share information with people, especially new ideas, it's important to realize that they are the main character in their story. And you can introduce a beginning, a middle, and an end to a new idea where they can be the hero. They can view this technology, this idea, this opportunity, or new concept in the context of their own life. And so it's through doing work with organizations like CERN and the Large Hadron Collider, helping them to lobby for basic science research funding, or the Guggenheim Museum, introducing new technologically enabled experiences to their audience, that I realized every company is a media company. And every piece of technology is an opportunity for storytelling. And it is that story that bridges the gap between tools and actual implementation details.
Oh, I love that so much. And like, one of the things I remember really, really distinctly in one of our early conversations, and especially as you were sort of explaining like how meaningful disco was for you when you went to decide to found that company, which I want to dive into, was this connection to your personal story, like your ancestry and your roots. both in Judaism and like your family as Holocaust survivors. I'd love if you would share a little bit about that because it was so touching, like how important identity is to you at so many levels.
I really appreciate this question a lot. And I also like this is cool. I don't think I've ever shared this publicly. So this is a cool opportunity to discuss. So when I was a little kid, I spent a lot of time with my family as one does. And as you noted, a number of members of my family were Holocaust survivors. My great aunt, who was, like my grandmother's mother when she was growing up, I spent a lot of time with, survived Auschwitz. And she was captured for hiding people in her home and kept alive as a translator because of her expertise of so many different languages. And so when I was a kid, my older relatives would constantly ask me, what did you learn today? What have you learned recently? What are you reading right now? And reinforce to me that the only thing that you own is what's inside of your head. That the government can fall, that the institutions that you trust can turn against you, and that at any moment, your sovereignty, your independence as a person, and your ability to control your way in the world is defined by what is owned inside your head, your knowledge, your expertise, your savvy in problem solving. And so when I learned about Bitcoin, I learned about the ability to manage a private key and to control financial assets that no other individual could intervene and take away from you. That was the first time that I learned about something that you could own, that no one could take away, that didn't have to live only in your head. And so the resilience of this technology, the ability for it to adhere to even the most extreme circumstances and offer empowerment, that is part of what drives me today. That despite the moving, changing evolution conditions of our world and the technology around us,
I just want to pause and just acknowledge how powerful what it is that you just shared. Like I have goosebumps everywhere. And being currently seated in Berlin and like in such a place where that history is so visceral, what you shared is really powerful. And it's really amazing what brings us to these spaces and like what motivates us deeply and intrinsically. And I think that it's honestly one of the things that inspires me most about you as a founder of Disco. Like it's so authentic. It makes so much sense. And so for people who may not be familiar, or maybe not even involved in Web3, can you share a bit about just decentralized identity? Like what is that and what does Disco do? Like how does that actually work for someone who may not be familiar?
Absolutely. So when we think about identity, often we'll think about the names that we go by, our government name, our email address, our Twitter handle, but we don't really own most of those names. We rent our Twitter handle from Twitter. We rent our email address from services like Gmail. We, utilize our government name in the context of things like the Department of Motor Vehicles that provide us with driver's licenses. And so there are very few names that we go by in the world that we own, that we can control. Similarly, the information about us, our university diplomas, our status as an organ donor, these traits and pieces of information about us are often relayed via proxy, not based on how we communicate ourselves. And when we extend that into the digital space, things like cookies, things like exchanges of information about different parties mean that the data that's used to personalize our experiences, from websites to display advertising, that data often doesn't come directly from us. It's rumors spread about us by apps that we've used before. And so what does this mean for our current app experiences? It means that in places like the United States, for example, apps are not really great at sharing data, with each other. They often, look at it as a business asset, something that is, proprietary to them. And so that means that, in many places in the world, we start off an app by filling out a form. In fact, in the United States, Americans spend more than 11.5 billion hours every single year just filling out forms. And every time we do that is an opportunity to fill it in wrong, to provide incorrect information, to provide a duplicate set of information, and increase the risk surface of that information falling into the wrong hands, growing out of date, or no longer being relevant. And so with Disco, our vision is that you will never have to fill out a form again. We believe that the metaverse should be your ability to show up in any digital or physical environment and enjoy a personalized experience based on the parts of yourself that you choose to share. And so that is why we built the Disco platform, our data backpack web app. We think about the data backpack very similarly to our physical backpacks. So you can imagine in real life, you might take your physical wallet full of your credit cards and money and put that into a physical backpack, purse, or bag that contains other items you need for your day, such as plastic identification cards or a sweater, an umbrella if it's raining. Similarly, in digital space, right now, our crypto wallets only allow us to carry our financial assets, our tokens, from one place to another. However, you are more than the contents of your wallet. You're a whole person, and you're probably going to need more information than just the money you have in order to enjoy personalized experiences, to get a job, or even to buy a sweatshirt. What size is it going to be? And so in order for you to show up with more information than just your money, to be able to carry it with you in a consensual fashion, you need what we call a data backpack, or the ability to take custody of information written about yourself and carry it, present it where you would like to, regardless of the protocol that an app is built on, whether it's Web 2, Web 3, in real life, e-commerce, a game, or more, because you are the same person who shows up to every single one of those apps, even if you're choosing to use a different name.
It's so interesting because in the early days of the internet, people were horrified by the idea of putting their credit card information online. It was like people would say they would never, ever do it. And so I often hear when people are talking about decentralized identity, this idea of like biometrics or any, passport, government IDs and KYC and all these different elements, that there's so many different perspectives of wanting anonymity versus, how that information that you put online could or could not be used against you, to your point. I'm just curious what your hot take is on the identity space. Like, what do you feel like is your controversial opinion that others may not agree with you, but you're like, this is where I think the future is going?
So my spicy take is that regulation is one of the best wingmen that Web3 could ever hope for. And that is because decentralized technologies are uniquely well suited to putting the subject of data in control of that data. So when we look to laws from GDPR in the European Union to CCPA in the state of California and similar regulations popping up everywhere from Japan to Canada, Latin America, and beyond, the ability to granularly control data about yourself and the ability for an enterprise or institution to granularly understand whose data they have, how they're using it, and where it goes to sleep at night, where it gets stored, that sort of complex set of needs and transparency is not available in the current setup of Web 2 data silos, where each app retains the data that's created inside of it. And individuals like you and me don't really have the ability to observe or control how that data gets used. And so now what we're starting to see is that complying with these laws is becoming really expensive, really difficult. So for example, Facebook just got levied with a $1.5 billion fine for the way that they are handling user data that is not compliant with these parameters. And so I think that in Web3, our technologies are uniquely well suited to the kind of logical centralization around an individual that our data needs to be more secure, to be more useful, and to save us and enterprises time and risk.
I love that. It is a hot take, right? This idea of regulation being actually an unblocker rather than a blocker. What do you think has been an exciting thing that you've learned as you've been thinking about those different perspectives about digital identity? What are yeah, like how have you learned about the space and what do you think is so exciting about it?
So one of the like spicy, exciting things that I have learned is that we stand on the shoulders of so many giants when we have this conversation in Web3. Often, I've been hearing recently, oh, identity is a new concept for Web3, but actually we're building upon multiple decades of effort led by some of the, world's foremost experts in connecting networks that don't talk to each other. So often we are able to build with, and at Disco, we directly utilize technologies created by the World Wide Web Consortium, the W3C, the good folks who run the internet. They're the entity that brought forth things like the URL that helped us enjoy websites and understand DNS and engage with it in a human readable and a searchable, understandable way. And so it is this organization that has brought forth the underlying technical tools that we can now use to help Bitcoin keys talk to Ethereum keys, talk to Optimism keys without the need for bridges or translation, gas fees, or additional technical complexity. So with these standards and the ability to call upon expertise from everywhere, from Google to Mozilla to the Ethereum ecosystem, we're able to combine the very best of what Web3 has to offer, in a way that can also talk to the whole world of data that we already have.
I love that. It's so nice to remember that, right? That we come from such a history and that, there's incredible amount of even just open source technologies that are being built that support so many of the things that we do. That's a great example of like an institution that's so inspiring. Are there other people or companies in the space right now that are really inspiring you?
So one that who always, they always come to mind is Boys Club. So boysclub.vip, global community of women and non-binary people in Web3. I like to say that they are the welcoming foyer of the Web3 ecosystem, a friendly place for everyone to begin learning and exploring, asking questions that, might to them feel simple and straightforward, but can really help to, achieve their better understanding and give them a space to find friends, colleagues, and collaborators. I also, along those lines, am constantly inspired by the work that Maggie Love does at SheFi. SheFi is a global community specifically focused on decentralized finance education for women and non-binary people, driving home the literacy and accessibility of new financial tools to empower, new generations of entrepreneurs and, individuals who represent a really diverse background, more so than, certainly those who might more naturally fall into the DeFi space or consider themselves to be degens.
I love that. I've also previously interviewed Maggie, and I'm such a fan of her as well. We'll link all of that in the notes here for people who are interested. And so for somebody who's just getting started and they want to have a digital backpack, what are like the first things you put into it, and what does that even look like to do it?
So the very first thing that you do, if you already have a crypto wallet such as Ethereum, MetaMask, you can just visit Disco.xyz, connect your wallet in one click as you would normally a Web3 dApp, and then you'll enter the world of the Disco, meaning that we create your backpack on your behalf. We provision your ability to control storage where you can stash those credentials, data written about you. And when you finish setting up your backpack, which can take less than a minute, we actually drop your very first credential in there, a Disconaut credential, celebrating the fact that you are now a Disconaut ready to traverse the metaverse in new ways. And that single credential actually starts to unlock some pretty cool stuff for you so you can learn what it means to carry that data with you from one app to another. So for example, we've got some NFT minting contracts set up on Ethereum and Optimism, where you may only mint an NFT of a cool disco mirror covered object. You can only mint that NFT if your backpack has the right data, meaning that you can connect your wallet, that minting interface is going to check to see whether you have a Disconaut credential. And if so, you are permitted to interact with that gated smart contract. So let's say you mint your awesome NFT on Ethereum layer 1, you get a disco mirror covered airplane, then you can immediately swap your RPC endpoint, meaning change, the protocol on which you're operating, swap it over to Optimism, and without needing to bridge that credential without needing to transform it at all. You can immediately use the very same Disco.not credential to gain access to mint another fun NFT on Optimism. And so what this illustrates is that, even just in the first couple minutes of interacting with these capabilities, you have new superpowers with your keys.
Oh, I love this so much. I really appreciate the fun that you bring to this, right? Like we need that. We need that so deeply to make this feel like anyone can really do it. So I'm so inspired by you. I really do recommend anyone here watching to like go get a backpack, try it. It's all about experimentation in this space. It's how we learn. And how can we keep in touch with you, Evin, personally, just as you share your story as a founder, and then Disco as you guys grow and evolve and continue to build?
My DMs are always open for your metaverse dreams. I'm at Proven Authority on Twitter and on Lens. You can also follow us on Twitter at Disco.xyz or visit us at Disco.xyz. And we welcome all of your questions, all of your wild metaverse ideas, and can't wait to build them together.
I love that. We'll definitely be following along. And thank you so much for everything you shared. This has been so much fun.
Thank you so much for having me, and I'll see you guys in the metaverse.
See you there.